Hello, everybody. I hope you're all doing great. I'm Laurence from YWAM Lyon in France. It's a big city in France. And I'm very happy to be hosting Janet Weiner today. Hi, Janet.
Hi, Laurence.
How are you? Is it sunny in
Every-
the south of France?
No, it's a little cloudy today, but it's a nice temperature, so it's
Okay,
beautiful.
nice and warm still.
Yeah.
I'm going to introduce you a little later, but I just wanted to take the most of this session just to give a shout out of what's going on in YM France right now. We had our national conference last month, and we were praying and brainstorming about the Olympic Games that are going to be in Paris in 2024. So I just wanted to welcome everybody to come and join us. We know that in the history of YWAM, it's been a huge thing, like for YWAM to be part of the Olympic Games. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to say that it's coming soon, and we are trying to organize something big to bless us or to bless our nations. So we need you, and I hope you'll be able to come with your teams everywhere you are in the world. We'll put a contact into the chat on Facebook or wherever, but you'll have the information so you can contact us and ask questions and get organized. So this is just a little ad for YM Friends before we start the topic of the month. So this leadership lounge is about women in the leadership. And I'm very glad to have Janet talking on it today. She's a very good friend of mine. We are together into the national leadership team in France, and it's been a few years now that we have the chance to work together. And Janet has been a real inspiration to me as a woman, as a leader, as a mother. She's a mother, a grandmother, a spiritual mother, everything. And she's been a model as well as an artist. She's a writer, and she will give some news about her books at the end of the session. And so I just want to welcome you, Janet, and to thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
And so I'm sure that you have a lot to say about this topic. You've been part of YM for a long time. And just to start, maybe you could share with us a little bit of your journey in YWAM.
Okay. Well, I joined YWAM when I was in my early 30s, and I was already married and already had 3 of my 4 children. So there's no typical YWAMer, but if there was, that probably isn't it. Yeah, I think more people do a DTS when they're younger. We did a Crossroads DTS in Lausanne, Switzerland. It was a very new world to me. My husband and I had been in local church. He'd been trained as a pastor. So that was more our reference point. But the Lord called us into missions and called us to France, and then eventually called us to YWAM. And so there was, even though I was relatively young, but I wasn't just out of high school or anything. We'd been walking in ministry for a while. We'd been married, we had children, but it was still a big learning curve for me to join YWAM at that point. It was and also a very traditional view of missions still, that you got called to one country and you serve that one country. And for me, joining YWAM was opening the nation, open my vision, as it does, enlarged it to nations going to nations, and so many more things. But those were big,
Yeah.
some of the big things. Yeah.
Yeah. And you've been part of the process of pioneering YWAM in Paris, right?
Well, no, it was already established when we got there. We were not part of the pioneer team. So when we got there was 20, 25 people on staff already, and the team had come from Lausanne, and and started it. But what struck me is that every single one of them seemed to me at the time was from a different country, and everybody had a different, when we first met them, everybody was doing something different. Oh, I give out Bibles in the open market. I lead the evangelism school. It was like everybody was doing something different. And again, from my local church background, that was just really different. But I liked it, but I didn't, it was a big paradigm shift, because it's not local church. It's a completely different kind of ministry. Local church is wonderful. YWAM is wonderful. They're just apples and oranges. So
yeah. Was it your first time in France, or did you come?
Yes. Oh, I had when we did our DTS, it was in Switzerland, but we had been living in France, for about a year and a half, but it was my first time in Europe. I moved to Europe when and we'd been working with another group at first in Holland and planted a church there, and then came to France.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. So this month we're talking about the topic of being a woman in the leadership, and we know that in our society there's a lot of differences between men and women. Like, for instance, the salary is different, or even in the church, there's some churches, like in my church a few years ago, women were not able to preach or teach, or they were not even able to share the communion, to give the communion to the rest of the assembly. And so we see that it's still something that is struggling in our society. And I wanted to know, what do you think about how we're doing in YWAM regarding men and women into the leadership?
Well, that is a huge question, but I will give my little view of it, what I see, which is, just part. I think because YWAM is not a local church, and because we pull from so many denominations and we focus on the YWAM values, which include championing male and female, old and young, and families and singles, all nationalities. There's already a mentality of inclusiveness that's already there in our values, which are biblical values. So we didn't make them up. Those are our focuses within YWAM. So that is already a difference that I felt. As I said, I came out of a local church ministry, and where women were very much relegated to children's ministry and women's ministry, especially at that time. This was 30 odd years ago. So, and, of course, it depends on your denomination, and some are even, more strict than others. But so for me, stepping into YWAM, there was more freedom for women relative to what I had experienced. But that doesn't mean there were still more men in leadership. There were still some differences, but I didn't feel that because in YWAM we don't have like a I don't know what you call it, but like a statement that said, a theological statement. I mean, there are different statements we have in Lausanne Covenant and things like that, but like many churches will state their position on women in ministry or state their position on things like that. And in YWAM, we don't go there, and we champion vision, and we champion young people. It doesn't say young men or young women. So in general, I think that we do, that the heart attitude is right behind it. And I did see more women taking more leadership than I had seen in the local church, even decades ago. I don't think it's completely equal yet. And there are other reasons besides just it being YWAM's fault too. I think because women, if women become mothers, many times we choose to stay home with our children. Some do and some don't. Some more and more couples now tend to share the children and share the ministry. And I think that's wonderful. But there's, I think sometimes there's less women in leadership in ministry because they're choosing to give the years that their children are at home. They're choosing to give more of themselves to the children while they're home. And that was certainly my case. I chose to do that. I was involved in ministry, but less so than I am now when my children are grown and gone and I have more time. But that was my choice, and I'm glad I made that choice. I don't regret it. So sometimes we see less women, but it isn't just because they're being prevented. It's because maybe they want to be with their children at home. And so do fathers too, more and more. So, and I think that's great, because then it gives room for women to step in. But if you're also sharing children at home, as you know, you have young children, you can be a leader, you can be involved, but it's just, there's more, it's a challenge, because your home life isn't just you and your husband, or you as a single person. Your home life is another whole ministry, another whole amount of energy.
Yeah.
So I also really, really appreciate Lauren Cunningham and David Hamilton's book on women and their position on women, and how they wrote. So it's so biblical to me, and it helps unpack some of the trickier verses about women teaching and leading, and it confirmed things that I felt intuitively, but that I couldn't defend biblically, and they did. And so I highly recommend that book. And anytime someone's really struggling with this issue, especially about some of the more difficult verses in the Bible on women in leadership, I highly recommend that book too, because I think it ends up in a very equal, I think in the way that God sees us as equals, and deals with what those verses, the context behind those verses, and how to understand the verses that seem to indicate women shouldn't lead or teach or speak in the church or things like that. So, or wear veils, or it gets even there's some
exactly.
unusual
So
things.
I haven't read this book yet, but I was wondering, like, if you saw a difference between before and after this book, in YWAM, because you've been there for a long time, and I just realized that for myself, when I entered YWAM, I really felt free of being myself, of being a woman, of being a leader. And as you said, I think like YWAM has a very good state of mind about women, and valuing women to be as equal as men. But in the reality, when I arrived into the national leadership team, for instance, in France, I was the only woman first. And each time we had just one woman and lots of men into the team. Now it's different. Like we are four women and 4 men. So I see an evolution. But when I went to some gathering in Europe, I saw more men than women. And the idea is not to have the exact number of men and women, just for the sake of it. But I was wondering, if that book brought an awareness, for YWAM, and if we saw an evolution from the beginning till now of like the place of women into the leadership.
Probably it did. It's hard for me to pinpoint and say, and I think also it must really be different country to country, because there's different cultural norms, and like when America versus France, there's even some differences, even though those two countries wouldn't be the most different from each other as maybe another two countries I could name. So I think there's so many factors to take into account. But I have to think that it did. I wasn't studying that, and I was in YWAM, and then I was out for a while back in the local church, and then I was back in. So even though it's been 35 years since I first started YWAM, there was a season in the middle where I was back in local church and in the spheres, and doing some business. And so, but I think that overall, the trend has been towards more women in leadership. Like we were in YWAM Kona for 5 years, and there were probably more women up front leading than men, maybe at least equal, if not more. Wow. And again, I don't think it was intentional. Like you said, you have to have the numbers, or just for the sake of it, because you want to have people that's their gift, and that's what they're called to do and what they're made to do. But I felt women were very much validated and released in leadership when I was in Kona. And that included a whole spectrum of things, whether it was on leadership teams or whether it was like leading a big meeting, big meeting. That often the MC, they were male and female MCs, but and that was a spiritual leadership too, not just MCing like administratively. And I saw a lot of young women championed as well, whether they were DTS staff or outreach leaders or starting a ministry. In Kona, there's just like vision abounding. There's just, I remember one day Lauren said, we're not short of vision around here, when like the fifth person got up to share their new vision and ministry. But in my memory, a lot of those people that got up and shared things were women. So it didn't feel unequal. It was like something I didn't really think about, because I think it felt pretty balanced there. And because Darlene is such a strong leader and is valued equally as Lauren, they're very different, but it's very, they're the co-founders of YWAM. That's how they're considered. And if you're around them any length of time, you're very aware of what each of them brings, and it's equally valuable and equally honored. So I think that's setting a really strong example as well.
Yeah, I think it's such a privilege to have founders and leaders that show us the way, you know, and to see them as a couple to work together. And as you say, they are as influential as, you know, each other, you know. And
yes.
yeah. And so I was wondering, because you've been leading different ministries with your husband, Dudley, and as I said, you're part of the national team, and we are 4 women and 4 men in this. And I was wondering, what, according to you, what are the strengths of the women into the leadership, and how is it relevant to have men and women working together as a team?
I think it's ideal when men and women can work together, because I think they bring such different things. I mean, different people bring different things, first of all, but you know, in the most general sense, there's things that men bring, and in the most general sense, there's things women bring. And when we're working well together, I think it brings a completeness and a balance. That's like back to Lauren and Darlene. And because I was in Kona 5 years and could observe them leading, you know, when they were there, they travel a lot, but they were there a lot too. And you knew what Darlene's strengths were, and you knew what Lauren's strengths were, and you knew the opposite a little bit too. Like, if you want this, don't ask Lauren, ask Darlene. If you want this, ask him. You know, you knew what each of them brought, and you could see how they balanced each other too in the ministry. He's big vision, she's practical and relational, to put it down to very, very, very simple terms. But that's just one example. But I think also in our national leadership team, when we I think, like, I've seen you, and when it was before there were 4 women, there was 2 women. There was you, and then I was the second one in this season. I think there's been a few women before us, but yeah. But I remember couple times where we were like, wait, guys, we need to do the relational part of the meeting. Like, let's stop and share first, or they're ready to go straight to business. And I like to get things done too. So do you. And, but we also value, and they don't not value it. It just, they were happy to be reminded mostly.
That's a good way to say it. Yeah.
And, yeah, and even I remember one time one of our team members died, and I remember the meeting afterwards, and you and I kept looking at each other, and the guys were, you know, I just think that we didn't really know how to talk about it, you know. And I think one of us finally said, we just need to talk about this or something. So I think, and that could have been a man doing that too. I wouldn't have shocked me if a man did it, but I think in general, women can have that relational side that comes to the front. And bring that into a meeting in an appropriate way. It can also be inappropriate too if it's out of balance. So that's where I've seen it work really well. When I seen it not work well is when it gets imbalanced, you know, when there's too much of one or the other. If it's too much business, or and not dealing with people as people, or, you know, when or if it's just all relational, we're not getting anywhere. That's not the point either. It's not thinking of like a leadership team.
So you mean like as a woman, like we really bring this like one of the strengths of women in leadership that is to be relational and to also to listen to our emotions, you know. And I think that sometimes
Mhm.
maybe as women we are into the leadership, we are afraid of sharing our emotions because we feel that we need to be strong or very
Mhm.
much task oriented and yeah and I think it's a challenge, you know, and sometimes we don't see many women into the leadership, maybe because we are scared of being ourselves or
Mhm.
being
Mhm.
judged, or I don't
Mhm.
know. Like, I feel sometimes we could have more women into the leadership, but they are not going into this challenge. And
Mhm.
sometimes I'm wondering why. I don't know. You know, like you point out just before that sometimes it depends on the season of life as being a mother for instance and you choose to stay at home do you think about other things that could restrict women for not choosing to go into the leadership even if they have the skills of
Mhm.
there.
Mhm. That's a great question. I think what that hits on, before I answer more specifically, is a general thing that is that I think women need to be women in leadership and not try to be like a man
Yeah.
in whatever their idea of a male leadership is. And because we need to bring who we are and what we are in an appropriate way, in a balanced way, just as the men do. We all, before God, bring our best Holy Spirit filled selves to the, but we need to, I think there can be a tendency, and I feel this too, to
Mm.
well, it's hard to figure out. I think that's why that time when we lost one of our team members, I think you and I hesitated. You and I haven't even talked about this, but I remember us looking at each other and I felt like we were thinking similar things. And it's like, we're not just going to not talk about this, but I also was afraid to bring it up because I didn't want to be too emotional or too, but we lost, and this, as you know, the person died suddenly. He hadn't been sick. We
Yeah.
didn't expect, it was a sudden death,
Mm-hmm.
and he's with Jesus, which is wonderful, but it was a shock, and it was our first meeting without him. So I wasn't ready just to dive into even personal sharing and then a meeting. I was like, can we just take a moment? But I was afraid to bring it up because I was like, well, what if that's, I don't know. I just held back. And that's,
Mm.
I think you did. I think it was you that finally said, can we talk about this? And I was like, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we did for like 5 or 10 minutes. I don't think wasn't like we descended into
Mm.
some really emotional, out of control place. But that's an example of me holding back,
Mm-hmm.
of what I felt incensed. And it had to do with an emotional thing, but I was like, is it my place? I mean, even though I'm in theory an equal member, but
Yeah.
I think women can hold back. I know I can
Mm-hmm.
on that category of things.
Mm.
So that might be part of the answer of why some women don't even want to enter into it, because they think that they're going to have to hold back or be like a man, That's so, I know those are big generalizations, but just be all business like, if that's the definition of being more male task oriented or whatever. But I'm very task oriented, and so are you. We both like to get things done, so
Yeah.
it's not like, and we have a lot of men on our team who really care about they share
Yeah.
their emotions. So it's not
Yeah.
like, I don't want to push things to extremes, but kind of in this raw,
Mm-hmm.
deep way that I think we need to not be afraid of being who we are as women, and what we can bring, because it brings a balance. So I don't know if that's why some women hold back. Maybe some also have been hurt in leadership or not felt validated, or I think it would be interesting to talk to someone much younger than me, and see how it is for, someone who has a gift of leadership, who has the capacity to lead, and how she's being
Yeah.
championed or nurtured by
Yeah.
her, where she is on her base. I think that
Yeah.
a lot of it is also sometimes calling people out and giving them the platform and giving them the space. I think women, again, in general, won't always take a place until it's offered. I think we hold back a little more in general. So
Mm.
that could be another thing, is that they wait to be championed. Again, overgeneralizing, but
Yeah.
where
Yeah, I
some
think like
men.
just to jump on what you're saying, I think like sometimes I have this fear of being taken as a feminist.
Yeah.
I don't know if you felt this way sometimes, but like if I go forward and just like I don't know react for women, I would say for some
Yeah.
situations, I would be afraid of yeah people thinking that I'm a feminist because I am not a feminist. I love like you know I love women and I love men. You know I think that we are all important, but I don't know why I have this in my mind. You know.
I think we get those things in our mind because we see bad stereotypes of that, and of people who take something that could be good, which is championing the equality, that men and women are treated equal, and maybe go to an extreme that we don't want to identify with, and then especially as Christian women don't want to identify with. And yet I think we can go too far sometimes and hold ourselves back when we don't need to. That's not how God sees us. He sees us as equal. He created male and female at the same time. He sees us also not beyond who we are as male and female. Like one's not valued more than the other, and we know that. But I think, and we just need to move in freedom. That's what we need to do.
And as you said before, like you said, like maybe like some women have been hurt in the past, and that could be a reason why they hold back. I was wondering if you experienced that before, if you had like any issues or experienced injustice as a woman into the leadership, and like maybe feeling like the weight of the authority of a man, but in an unjust way. I don't know how you say it in English.
Yeah. Unjust way, I think. Yeah, I think I understand the
I don't know
question.
if you experienced that and if you would like to share a little bit about it and how you got through this.
I haven't had it would be much more subtle in my case. I think when I actually said that earlier, I was thinking of people I know who put themselves out there even more so, like in a church situation, or really tried to take on some leadership and were shut down and or told they couldn't because they were women. Nothing like that has happened to me personally, but I do know people that have women who have been said, yes, you can be a pastor, but you will be in the women's ministry or the children's ministry. Again, thinking of local church. And in YWAM, there aren't those restrictions, at least in general, and it's not what it wouldn't represent the values if there were restrictions. Like we see women in YWAM who lead bases, who lead schools, it's just the norm. That's normal. So for me, it would be much more subtle. And I think it even goes further back to where sometimes I didn't put myself forward to take leadership because, like you said, I didn't want to be taken as a feminist in a pushy, aggressive kind of way, or I just already knew that wasn't a possibility. Certain things weren't. So I'm thinking of my much younger self. So for me, it wasn't overt. It was kind of subtle, if that makes sense, and kind of kept me from I could have still stepped forward and tried to take more, but I made other choices, and I had children for many years. And so those were other things, other factors. But and for me, I started stepping more into leadership when my children were older, and it was very natural, and it was within YWAM. It was like being parts of teams, and then after a while becoming more involved with the leadership of that team. It was very organic and natural, and that worked really well for me. If I found a place where, especially in Kona, where it's very big, I found a place and a way to serve, then within that, after a while, then often leadership opportunities would come because it grew out of this place that I already fit and was having experience and had experience in that area. So but I think many women get told directly that there's limits, and not in YWAM so much, but I hope not. And again, I don't know about every country and every base in the world. There are probably people who have had that experience in YWAM.
What would be your advices, for a young woman who's going to start into leadership? What would be your advice for her?
I have two thoughts, and one is to stay, and it's about being a believer, but about being, this would be for any believer, but it applies in leadership as well, is stay really intimately connected with the Lord and listen to his voice and see what he's leading you to do and to step into. It just gives us so much confidence. We know how to listen to God's voice. We know how to obey his leading. If we do that, then there's a lot of confidence and freedom in that. And then we're being obedient, and there's life. And the second thing is to be yourself, like we were just talking about. And as a woman, not holding back because it might sound too emotional or whatever label we put on it. Also just not holding back in who you are in your personality. I think as women, sometimes, not all women are like this, but many, when we can kind of defer to others or put the needs of others ahead of ourselves, which is biblical, but we can do it in a way that becomes not biblical, where we're not the person we're made to be and speaking up and sharing what God's put on our heart, or bringing what he's shown us to bring, even if it's different than what everybody else is proposing. And so to not give into fear, but to be who God made you to be.
Thank you. That's great. It's good input. And if I want to be more specific as well, as you said, I'm a mother of two young children. What would you be your advices for mothers that are leaders?
That is so challenging. And I think, again, you have to ask God where he wants you to put your time, what to say yes to and what to say no to in both arenas, in ministry and leadership involved in that, and in your family. It's going to be different for each person. I think even for myself, when I was younger, I wanted to stay home with my kids, but I also assumed that's what God wanted me to do. And if I had to do it again, I would ask him more, how much do you want me to stay home with them? And how much else can I do? I made some assumptions, and they weren't bad. To stay home with my kids fully wasn't a bad choice. It wasn't like, but I realized later I could have asked him more, and there might have been more I could have been doing. And when they were teenagers and I started doing more, my teenage son at one point said, "You're so much happier now, Mom." And I'm like, okay, one, you notice my happiness. You're 16 or 17, whatever. I mean, he's an amazing person, but it was still surprised me and touched me. But also I am. Oh yeah, I am. So I think even when they were all younger, it might have been beneficial if I did a bit more outside of the home. I did do some things, but I could have possibly done more, but I didn't. I made assumptions instead of asking God. So that's what I would say is, if you personally, or any mother of young children, is saying, God, what do you want me to do? And he's like, go do this thing and they'll be fine, or do more, whatever. Then we do it with real confidence because we know it came from him.
Yeah. And to be aware about the filters that we could have, like filters from our cultures or on education, that will, as you say, bring assumptions, of what we should do and what should be the priorities. And so I think it's a very good advice, like just to ask God in details what are the priorities and where we should put our time. And thank you so much, Janet. Maybe you could share, if you're okay with this. It's a question that we used to ask to all the speakers that come into this leadership lounge, to share about a mistake that you made, and so we can all learn out of it. And I like these kind of questions and answers because we can, in some ways, identify ourselves to you, and it brings so much humanity into what we're sharing.
Oh yeah, no, I agree with that in terms of what it can bring. Where to start? I think my biggest mistakes have been in general, and I just addressed those, which were making assumptions and not continuing to listen to God along the way, and also holding back from who I fully am.
Mm.
Those would be, so I already addressed that. But in terms of a specific time, one that comes to mind when I was in my 20s, and I was leading I was in a local church, but I was leading a discipleship group. It was like it was a small group of women once a week, but it was discipleship oriented. I taught and we shared, and then I taught them how to teach and how to start their own groups and things. But we had a lot of homework, and it was like I had pretty high, it was how I was trained in our church. We had pretty high standards of like how you studied and the homework and the things, and it was good, and most of us really enjoyed it. And there was one woman who couldn't keep up, and she just kept making excuses. And then finally I just asked her to leave the group, but I didn't pray about it enough, and I didn't handle it very well. And she came and said, I caught up and I did it on. I go, well, no, but I'm asking you to leave. And I had so much damage control so much going back and repairing relationship to do. And I hadn't really discussed it well with my co-leader. I had a co-leader. And so that was a big mistake. I should have prayed about it more.
Mm.
I should have talked with my co-leader more. I should have handled it differently.
Yeah.
And I went too fast. I just went too fast. And I was rigid in my, like, this is what we do and you're not doing it, so you're out of here. I mean, I was a little nicer than that in how I said it, but that was my heart. Like, you can't keep up, you can't keep it. Yeah. So I wouldn't do that again. Or if the person really didn't belong in the group, I would take it to hold, as I said, a different process of working with her. And I kept thinking she'd go, oh, good, yeah, I'm relieved. But she fought me back. And so it was the amount of time I had to spend I think we did repair the relationship. I apologized. But it took a lot of energy and time. Plus it hurt her, and that was not good. So
thank you for sharing.
So just not go too fast. That would go in the category of don't go too fast.
Okay. Thank you.
I was kind of I'm frustrated, and it might have even been the right decision, but I don't even know anymore because I didn't handle it.
Okay, thank you, Janet, for sharing a little bit of your mistakes. So if I want to sum up a little bit of our discussion we had right now, I think you gave us many good principles, like as you said about the mistakes, like of going too fast, I think it's always good to remember to slow down in our process. And sometimes we want to be in a rush and make decisions rapidly, but I think we need to take the time to brainstorm, to share with other leaders, to pray, of course. And I like the fact that you say also, as women in leadership, like just to be free to be ourselves and not to be out of the fears of being taken for somebody else, and like just to be free to be woman, and not trying to be somebody else or to be different than who we are. I think God has given us talents, and if we are called to leadership, it's with who we are as women, with our capacities, emotions, and sensitivities. So I think it's really good, everything that you share. So thank you so much. Another question that we used to ask to end the session is about books that impacted you. So I would like to give you the time just to share about some books that you've read and that you would like to advise us to read. And
I think probably there are more, but the ones that come first to mind, well, now you do it online, but it's the whole Strengthsfinders. It's not called a personality test, but it's in that category. And it's about finding your strengths. And if people that hear this and are familiar know what I'm talking about. And if you don't, it's a online personality profile that helps you determine what your strengths are so you can maximize strengths instead of trying to work on your weaknesses. And you only get a little better if if you take what you are strong at, in other words, how God made you, and develop that, you get much better. And that was helpful for me personally. It was very helpful working in teams and understanding other people and as a leader. And there's even a book, I don't have the books with me because I gave them over to our base library, but all the information I think is online now too, is Strengthsfinders for leaders. And it had chapters on if you're leading a person with this strength. And I looked up people, especially that I was having a harder time leading or understanding. Just, sometimes you just have that feeling of like, we're not connecting. This person means well, I mean well, but this is like going like this or something. And so there was very helpful to read, for example, about that one of that person's main strengths and how to lead somebody with that strength. And it would give me some tips of like, this person needs more of this or less of this or whatever. And that was very practical and helpful. But just even knowing, we've always done it as a staff, the Strengthsfinders, and we've done it as the ELN, as the leadership team, and it's helpful. I don't remember everybody's every strength. I usually find one or two that I remember about people, and it helps me understand why they're working the way that they're working and how to work well with them. So
yeah,
those
and I
are
think
two, and
I think it's good to focus on strengths and not only on weaknesses. And I
yes,
like this principle too.
yes, me too. And yes. So yeah, there's probably other ones, and I think things that have probably helped me the most weren't direct leadership books. They were books about that helped me grow as a believer. So then if I start talking about that, that's a long discussion. But I think that the biggest thing you bring to your leadership is being intimately connected with Jesus and living fully who he's made you to be, in line, as I keep saying, that. So anything that strengthens our walk with him, obviously, first of all, the Bible truly nourishes, aligns us, strengthens us. And there's a lot of leadership principles in there too, a lot. And how to just live and serve one another. But
yeah, thank you. And there's another amazing book that you need to show us. As I said at the beginning, you're a writer, and I don't know if you want to even share a little testimony about your process in this, being a writer.
Sure. Well, this is the book.
Yeah.
And it's a historical novel, and it's the first in a series, and I even put that on the cover. So now I'm committed, and I have to at least write one more book, which I'm halfway through. I have in mind up to 4 in this series, but that it's based on actual historical events in the south of France, in our region, the Cévennes, which was a very Huguenot region full of Christian Protestants, and they were heavily persecuted, and a lot of really courageous things happened. A lot of really atrocious things happened. And when I was reading the stories, I thought, these are amazing stories, and they happen to be true. And so I love reading historical fiction. So I decided to put it in that form, because I think it's more enjoyable to read a story and watch character. And also the characters are just struggling with things that you and I would struggle with, but in the context of this persecution and as Christians, the choices they had to make, and the consequences and all that. So, and it's fun because it's set here where I live, and I can bring in things from my town and the region. So that's really fun. But yeah, my process to get to writing has been long, and I didn't fully start until about 6 years ago now. And I did dabbled a little before, but about 10 years earlier, but because I chose to focus on children and other forms of ministry, it wasn't until about 5 years ago I had a significant birthday, and also we just needed to make some changes, and because I was burnt out, and I took some time off, and during that time really started writing this book. And I was like, and right a few months before that, I said, Lord, when am I ever going to have time to write this right? Like, because it takes some time. You can't just, for me, I can't just like, okay, at night, I'm going to sit down and write. Like it takes morning brain. For me, it's morning, fresh brain, some space, and it takes space to think and reflect and research and learn how to write all the things. So so the process started, and then the more I did, the Lord really kept saying, just write. So I am still doing ministry with the base, but less than I was before, a lot less, because this is my main ministry, right? This, and the Lord just has been pretty urgent, like write. So,
Wow.
and I'm delighted to do it. So
Yeah, that's so amazing. And we can find it on Amazon, right?
yes, on Amazon in most countries.
Awesome.
So, and it'll be in English right now, but you could get it in France or
Yeah.
at .com or any of the other Amazons too. It's been translated into French, and it's I'm hoping it's before some different French publishing houses, and I'm waiting to hear back from them. I hope that they will pick it up and then distribute it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing with us today, Janet. It was such a joy to have you, to hear from your experience, to receive your opinions. And I just wanted to ask you if you could pray for women in YWAM. So just to
Yes.
finish the session, like if we can finish with prayer.
Okay, yes, I'd be happy to. Heavenly Father, we thank you that you made us different. You made men, you made women, you made different, and all the different variety within that, and not to mention our cultures and our backgrounds. And you're such a creative God, and you have made just endless combinations and possibilities, and each of us are so unique. And yet there's also similarities too. And Lord, we just want to step into all that you have for us. We don't want to be any less than what you've created us to be, as women, as people, as your children, as people who follow you. We don't want to hold back in any way. We don't want to lessen what your design for us is. And so I pray for each woman, each man who's working with a woman that might listen to this would step more fully into valuing and encouraging and championing and giving room for one another and how we're different. And I pray for the women, especially, that they would not hold back, or those that have felt they put themselves out there but then been hurt would allow that there would be healing, and they would allow your the way that you heal, that brings actual more life out of that same very place. And I pray that blessing on people, that they would, especially women who've been hurt as in leadership, that they would allow you fully into that hurt and let it be transformed into greater strength, and also a source of life for other women and for all that they do with you and for you. And above all, Lord, remind us all, help us all to stay abiding in you and listening to you, and not making assumptions, but to listen and to keep listening, and then to obey what you show us. To walk in your ways is the best, like you did, Jesus, with the Father. You only did what you saw him doing, and we want to do that too. We want to do what you did, and you said we'd do even greater things. So yes, please. We have a ways to go, but we want that. We want all that you have for us. So I pray that blessing on us, and enable us to listen and be open, and to follow you with our whole hearts. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much again for your time, Janet. Thank you, everybody, for listening to us. And I really hope that it's been a good leadership launch for you, that you were encouraged. And I just want you to say again that we have this website, ELLC, where you can find so many good resources for the staff, for if you are a leader of a DTS or in a base or at a national level. There are videos, discussions, articles on different topics. And so it's really a privilege to have it all together on the same website. So if not yet, go and have a look and find what you need, to be encouraged and to have new resources for your leadership skills. So goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, Janet. And again,
Goodbye,
thank
Laurence.
you so much. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Thank you.